The year is 2013. After 5 long years, the latest installment of GTA has released, GTA 5. Thank God you'll never have to wait that long for a GTA game ever again, you think to yourself. Let It Go becomes the tune of the century as Frozen surprisingly becomes an instant Disney classic. The world mourns the death of Nelson Mandela, one of the most culturally influential people in history. A man dressed as Batman enters an English police station to hand over a wanted fugitive, and most significantly, my most viewed video of all time, 5 key mistakes that low elo players make, is released. Well, it's been almost a decade since those days, and I feel like it's high time I remaster and revamp that video in the spirit of nostalgia. And of course, because that video is old and really ugly. And if you happen to also be really ugly, don't even sweat it. This video will help you climb the ranks, and if you get high enough, it won't even matter how ugly you are. Because as we were all saying in 2013, chicks dig elo. So, without any further ado, here are 7 key mistakes that low elo players make, 2021 edition. Let's start with the biggest crime of them all. Low elo players are terrible with their vision control and map awareness. We've all been there. You're 2-0 up against your lane opponent, you get close to killing them every single time they walk up to try and take a minion, and then you start getting camped by the enemy jungler for 15 minutes and end up 2-7 in the bin and being flamed by your entire team. Now, before you start screaming jungle difference in chat, take a second to think about what's going wrong and what you can do differently. If you're dying that much to the enemy jungler, there's a good chance you haven't been seeing him coming before he got to your lane. Now, this is where warding is crucial. You might not be able to buy the old vision wards of 2013 when I made the previous version of this video, but nowadays you get them for free in the form of your trinket. Make good use of them. Not only will you die less, but you'll get crucial information on where the enemy jungler or roamers are, which allow your team to play more freely. For example, if the jungler shows top side to gank you, then he can't be bot side to gank your AD carry, and maybe your jungler can get dragon, that kind of stuff. And importantly, it's not just about warding, but it's about warding properly in good places. Make sure you use your wards when you're most vulnerable. Don't waste them. Usually this will happen when your lane is starting to push towards the enemy. General rule of thumb there, the further you are from your tower, the more vulnerable you become. If you're playing jungle, then try and put those wards down to either cover your laners who aren't warding, or put it down in the enemy jungle, spot him when he's taking his camps. Knowing where the enemy team is will make the game much easier to play. Don't just rely on your trinket wards though, as well guys. Got to buy some control wards every now and then as well. I know you guys want to play aggro crazy all the time, and if you want to do that, you got to invest in those sighty whitey vision sticks. Next up, I want to talk about item builds. Low elo players are crap at building items, especially adapting their item builds. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that low elo players are building wrong all the time. Far from it, in fact. There's a very good chance that you'll have a great grasp of what your core build will be on your champion. The thing is that you've also got to adapt your builds from game to game depending on certain situations in order to get the most out of your items. The simplest and most obvious example of this will be your shoes. A lot of champions want to switch that up from game to game. You know, are you against heavy auto attackers? Then plated steel caps will be the way to go. Or are you against a butt ton of crowd control? Then consider merc treads instead. Some more good examples include building grievous wounds against heavy healing such as Soraka, Samira, Aatrox, or pretty much any new champion in League of Legends. Zhonya's is great versus high physical damage or high burst, like you might find versus a Zed or a Talon. Or even against someone like Syndra, where you can use the Zhonya's active to completely negate her ulti. If you're playing a carry, then you might want some armor penetration, depending on if you're against bruisers and tanks with a lot of armor. You get the idea, guys, and in the words of the infamous Volibear Grills, improvise, adapt, overcome. Another thing that low elo players struggle with is their positioning and how to play team fights. The squishier you are, the more important your positioning becomes. Roles like ADC with champions such as Jinx and Ashe will quite literally live or die by their positioning. Their impact in team fights is massive, but only if they're not dead. Shocking statement, I know. Positioning is a topic that can get really in depth, and this video has other stuff to talk about, so I'll try and give an abridged version here. The core concept is this: space. No, not asteroids and stars and planets like the flat one we live on, but space as in empty areas. If you're a ranged DPS, you want to use the space created in a fight to put out as much damage as possible. Once you start encroaching on the available space, you become more and more vulnerable to getting jumped on by the enemy team. Basically, stand the hell back and hit what you can. For the other roles in the game, it's your job to create space for your damage dealers. You can do this on tanks by jumping in and frontlining, soaking up the enemy attention, making it so they deal with you and not your carries, who will then be free to deal damage. Bruisers and divers will do a similar thing, but more focus on disrupting and taking down the enemy carries. And supports or peelers will create space for their damage dealers by directly protecting them from the opposing players trying to do what I just mentioned now. Assassins kind of break this rule a little bit. The space they're concerned about has more to do with vision and setting up flanks. Assassins don't want to jump in head first, but will try and find an angle to take out the enemy carries. As a damage dealer, it is really important to keep in mind the abilities of the enemy champions and how your available space can shift in an instant. For example, if you're outside Alistair's headbutt range, that space is pretty safe, right? Unless, however, he has flash, in which case the space you can navigate is now much narrower. It's all about knowledge of the opponent's abilities, and that will come with time. I know there's a lot of champions in the game, but the more you play, the more you'll get the hang of it. And a great way, if not the best way, to learn what other champions do is to play them for yourself as well. Another thing that lower elo players tend to struggle with is knowing their champion's strengths and their win conditions. Each champion in League of Legends has their ideal role, job, and how they should be played. Knowing what these are will make things a lot easier for you. You see mistakes like this being made even in professional play, and it's really something that makes or breaks success in League. There are over 130 different champions in League of Legends, and each of them will play slightly different to the next one. Don't let that overwhelm you, however, just grasping the basics is enough of a foundation, and to be honest, this whole concept isn't really that complicated at all. Let me just give you some examples, right? So champions like Fiora, Yorick, Jax, they're great at split pushing because they excel in 1v1 scenarios and are great at taking down towers. They're not so good when you bring them into grouped up fights, and as such, trying to force team fights with them is rarely a good idea. So if you're a Jax main and you find yourself losing a lot, maybe it's because you're going, screw it, I need to fight with my team, and maybe you shouldn't be doing that. A champion like Malphite as well is basically the opposite. He's not great 1v1 and is pretty slow at killing towers. Plus, he has a great ultimate that absolutely demolishes team fights. So, the opposite of what we just mentioned applies. You don't want to spend all game sitting in a side lane, and instead you want to group up and look to engage fights. All in all, it's really simple stuff, but just make sure you're thinking about it when you're in game. A lot of time you'll go on autopilot, you're not playing to your champion's strengths. Using the core strength of the champion you're playing will give you a defined path of how you should play the game. Another issue for lower elo players is the way they view champion select. League of Legends is a game with few stages, as we all know. You've got early game, mid game, late game. But before all of that, there is the stage that can affect the outcome of your game before you even load onto the Rift. And that stage, of course, is champion select. You can get advantages way from the get-go here, just from changing some simple things. For example, if you're playing Heimerdinger and you know you're against a Zed, you might want to swap out your Ignite for an Exhaust so he can't one-bump you. You can also change your runes to be more focused on armor, that kind of thing. Your secondary tree in general, whoever you're playing, is often quite situational. You can consider taking Resolve for some of the early defensive boosters, just so you don't go out there and feed your ass off in lane. People also mistakenly assume that the game is over when they think the enemy has a better team comp than them. Honestly, this is just flat out not true. You are giving your opponents way too much credit. Just like those knobheads who thought that during quarantine they'd be able to stay in shape because they'd have all the time in the world to work out from home, and now look at them brandishing their dad bods and titties. It's me, I'm knobheads. Fact of the matter is, guys, your opponents will be making a lot of mistakes. They won't be playing their champion to its fullest potential, and hell, there's a very, very good chance they pick something broken just because community perception says that it's strong, not because they can actually play it. And I promise you, you will be far better off focusing on lesser popular champions and mastering them rather than worrying about what all the new champions with 6 dashes can do. Yes, they are annoying to play against, but the inexperience that people have on those champs can work in your favor. Remember guys, always pick comfort over anything else in solo queue. And for our penultimate point in this video, something else that lower elo players struggle with, and to be honest, it's probably the thing they struggle with the most, is how to close out a game and press your advantage. A lot of people in League of Legends struggle when it comes to closing out games. You can be miles ahead, 10 kills up, got all the dragons, but you still haven't taken their nexus. The biggest thing that you need to focus on to turn a winning game into a won game is your win conditions. Your win conditions will vary from game to game. You could have a comp that relies on team fighting, but you're not grouping up enough, or you have a comp that relies on split pushing and picking off enemy champions, but you keep trying to fight as 5, etc. Now, as soon as you recognize what it is your team wants to do, what it is your team excels at, what those win conditions are, the easier it will be to set a path to victory. Obviously, we can't talk about closing a game out without talking about good old Naren Basher. He gets a special spotlight here as one of the easiest ways to seal out a game. The siege power from the enhanced minion buff is so good at taking down towers, and most importantly, it gives a clear signal to your team that now is group and push time. Even the ironist Iron knows that taking Baron means you go on the offensive. There's obviously way more nuance to using Baron than what I just said, but again, trying to keep it short for this video. The best tip I can give for closing out games outside of playing to your win conditions is to focus on your objectives, specifically the Baron, Dragon, Towers, and the first Herald. If you ever feel lost at any point in the game, just ask yourself, how can I best be playing for these objectives? And the last thing I want to talk about for today's video is your mental. I meant you're in the possessive sense, not that you are mental, but who knows, you're a League of Legends player, maybe you are mental. Actually, you know what? You are mental! We all know that League can be ruthless. We all know that it's full of more dickheads than a Bukkake. And sadly, even a chill game can easily turn and become a tilt fest in no time. But it's in times like those that it's really important to keep your cool. Flaming and blaming only going to make things worse. No matter how bad your team is, every game is winnable. Some might need a miracle, others just need some lube and a prayer. To help you recover from the tilt in game, here are some easy tips. Slash mute all. Put on some chill lo-fi study beats, 24-hour rain music. Sit up straight, shoulders back, and head forward. Sounds dumb, but trust me, that actually helps. And breathe. I'm sure most of you will be doing that breathing part fairly frequently in your everyday life, but some deep breaths, slow breaths, calm yourself down, works wonders. Special love, by the way, to that first point. Mute all. It is your best friend if people are getting annoying in chat. There is no shame in hiding that stuff so you can focus on yourself and your own game. Remember, no matter how rough the game gets, how impossible it seems to win, you can always win. And hey, even if you don't win, you learn way more in games that you lose than games that you're winning. So it's all good improvement. And that just about does it for our video today. 7 mistakes that low elo players make. I hope you enjoyed this video, my remaster of my most popular video of all time. It's very strange to think that I've been doing YouTube for as long as I have. Bloody hell. If you guys want to see some more updated videos or like some old guys that I did, feel free to let me know. Give me some ideas in the comments. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Go follow me on Twitter at Foxdrop, Instagram at Foxdrop, and Twitch/Foxdrop. All those links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. I love you all, and I will see you in my next video.